We're kind of coming up to an odd chunk. I was talking to someone before the service, and how are you feeling? Well, I don't know. I don't know how to respond to that anymore, honestly. I don't know how to say, how are you feeling? I don't know. Because I don't want to say, I'll be happy when it's done, because that's not good. But I'm excited about where we're going, but I'm always a little nervous when we handle the Word of God. Where we're going, what are we talking about? Last week we had a phenomenal story. I mean, one of my I've just got to stop saying my favorite story, because everything's my favorite story. But this phenomenal story of Elijah, and he is exhausted, and he is done. He is worn out, and he is fleeing from Ahab, or more specifically Jezebel. And he's running away, and he is just underneath this tree, and he's complaining, I just want to die. And God meets him in that tree and says, go, I have called you. He sustains him with cakes and with some water. He sustains him, and he spends 40 days traveling to Mount Sinai, the Mount of God. And in that moment, God comes to him and says, well, what are you doing? And he speaks to Elijah. There is the massive wind that rips apart the mountain. There's the fire that comes down, and there's this earthquake that shakes the mountain. And yet God was not in those things. He may have sent those things. He's the God who does those things, but the voice of God was in the whisper of the wind that came afterwards. And he spoke to Elijah, to his very heart, to his very soul, the core of his being. What are you doing? What are you doing? And all of this is in response to that amazing picture from 2 weeks ago when they had the confrontation with the prophets of Baal, where they were trying to call down fire, and Elijah prays, and fire comes down and consumes the altar. And so they respond. Jezebel tries to kill Elijah because they absolutely humiliated and destroyed the prophets of Baal. Now, this is going to be a lot about Ahab today. We're going to get into kind of a more historical chunk. And now that's really important because, well, it's historical, it's true. These are not just stories that are made to inspire us and stories that are made to kind of make us think. They're historical accounts because they're true history. These events actually happen. And so some of these in the book of Kings is there to tell the story of what's going on in the world. Also historical is that because it continues to, it's not the blatant parables, it's not the stories that we read about where God whispers to us. But in these historical narratives, what I have loved about them so much is that we begin to see more and more of the character of God. God consistently being himself throughout the ages. Because there is a prevalent, I would say, misinformation going on. A lot of, and maybe it's not directly spoken, but there's a lot of this idea where, well, the God of the Old Testament, he's different. We shouldn't talk about the God of the Old Testament because he's mean, because he's angry. No, I like to talk about the God of the New Testament. There was a pastor several years ago that says we need to unhitch the Old Testament from the New Testament. That is absolutely wrong. Absolutely wrong. In fact, the Old Testament completes our understanding of the New Testament. It is the same God yesterday, today, and forever. The God that we are going to look at is the God that he didn't change over time and slowly get nice. No. This is the same God. And we'll see in this story that God is a God for himself, that God is a God is about his glory, that God is a God who is extending grace after grace. The same God who whispers to the heart of Elijah is going to do some incredible things today. Incredible things. But we need to start back a bit. At the end of chapter 19, we're going to shift gears a bit. Elijah has just left the mountain of God. He's been sent by God to go do other things in the nations. And on his way, we have this little sidestep. But this is the story. We're really going to look at two stories today. We're going to look at the story of Ahab, and we're going to look at the story of Elisha. Not Elijah. There is Elijah in this story, but he's going to call his servant Elisha to follow him. And we're going to see two responses to God. And it's important we have to backtrack because we got to remember through all of this, Elijah's been there, but Ahab has been through all of this as well. He watched the prophets of Baal fail. He watched fire come down and consume the altar of Yahweh. He watched Elijah pray for rain, and rain came. He watched Elijah do some absolutely astounding things. Not because Elijah's Superman, but because he serves God. Ahab got to watch these things. And we're going to see how Ahab responds to God, and we're also going to see how Elisha responds. Now, Elisha's tale is really short. So we pick it up in 19, verse 19. So he departed from there That's Elijah. And he found Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen in front of him. And he was with the 12th. Elijah passed him by and cast his cloak upon him. So what that was is that's a sense of calling. That's a sense of anointing. That's a sense of Elijah's walking by, he takes off his outer cloak, and he sees the guy, and he puts it around his shoulders and keeps going. It's just this interesting Elisha who woke up, just a regular day, I'm going to go out and I'm going to plow my field, I'm going to do my thing, and I'm going to do my work, and he's got it going. He's got the 12th oxen, there's 11 in front of him, he's going along his way, he's working hard, and Elijah comes by, who's just had this incredible experience with God, and he takes off his cloak, and he throws it on Elisha, and he keeps going. Now, put yourself in the spot of Elisha behind an oxen. I would be extremely weirded out if I didn't know what was going on. Did that homeless guy just throw his coat on me and leave? Like that's the thought I would think. But Elisha is a well-known prophet. People know who he is, and he takes off his cloak and he throws it on Elisha, and Elisha immediately knows what this means. He immediately knows that there's something going on, so he responds. He responds to the call of God. He responds to the call to ministry. He responds to the call to service. And he left the oxen and ran after Elijah. There wasn't a debate. There wasn't any debating. He left, cloak on, run. Leave it was. Like he kept going. And he says, let me kiss my father and my mother, and then I will follow you. This is a calling of a disciple. This is a calling of a servant. He throws his cloak on him saying, I'm calling you to be my servant. I'm calling you to walk in the way of God. I'm calling you to walk in the way to follow me, to learn what I do, to grow in the knowledge of God. It's not that he goes, oh man, do I really want to give up this farming business? Do I really want to give up the oxen? Do I really want to do this? No, it's an immediate, I want to follow him. He has initiated the call. I want to be discipled. I have the hunger. We see that in Elisha, this desire. He wants the things that Elijah has. He is jealous to know God deeper. And Elijah throws his cloak on him saying, I will teach you. I will make you like me. Which sounds funny, but that's really what discipleship is making someone like someone else. And as disciples of Jesus, we are making ourselves like Jesus, and we hope to make other people like Jesus. That's discipleship. Living life, making others more like Christ. And here we have Elijah throwing his cloak on Elisha, and he says, just let me go kiss my mom and dad, and I'll follow you right now. Immediate change. So here's what Elisha does to finalize it. He's not leaving any door open. He's not leaving any chance at going back to it and saying, maybe if this doesn't work out, I can always come back to the oxen. And he said to them, Elijah said to them, go back, for what have I done to you? Wait a second. Do you really want this, Elisha? Do you really know what you're getting into? Yes, I threw your cloak on you. Yes, I think you have it. Yes, I want you to invest your life. I want to invest my life. I want you to know Christ and know him better. But do you know what's going on? Do you really know what you're getting into? So here's how Elisha responds. Not halfway. And he returned from following him and took the yoke of oxen, the thing on the shoulders of the oxen that's pulling the plow, and he sacrificed them. So he cuts them up. And he makes a fire with it. So he takes his yoke, takes the plow, he cuts it all up, chops it up, makes a little bonfire there, and he kills the oxen and sacrifices the oxen right there to God. There's no going back, because I'm taking his work, his life, his invested at that time, everything who he was, and I'm going to sacrifice it literally to God so that I can follow God better. I was kind of challenged when I read that a little bit in that moment. Elisha is willing to give up everything. Everything in my work, in my life, and everything in who I am, I'm going to sacrifice right now to God so that I can pursue him fully. Wow, that is quite it's either this way or that way. There's no grade, there's no hemming and hawing with Elisha. It's, I'm in, and here's what I'm going to do to show you that I'm in, Elijah. You can have it all. I'm following him. What a phenomenal example. What a challenging example. To say, but at the same time, it's like, do I have to burn everything? Do I have to give up everything to follow God? No, but I do have to live with everything with an open hand. Is this something you want, God? Is this something you want me to do? Should I give up this? Do I need to live my life differently at work? Do I need to live my life differently in the way I walk? Is there something that you're calling me to do that you want me to give up so that I can be better of a disciple for you, that I can be a better servant for you? Elisha was willing to do that, and maybe that's something that I was convicted of that I need to pray about more. What are things in my life that I'm hanging on to that I shouldn't be hanging on to? So that's Elisha. What a fantastic response. Probably the appropriate response, the challenging response to the call of God. So now we're going to get to switch gears into chapter 20. We're going to get to Ahab. Now the next, really 3 chapters, 20 through 22, is really going to be the end of Ahab. We're not going to get through all of Ahab, but we're going to hopefully finish chapter 20, hopefully. We'll see. We're going to get through this, but the end of Ahab. And really this next section is going to be about Ahab's war with Syria. Hence why I start talking about the historical accounts of this. Now this is important for understanding what's going on in the book of Kings. But at the same time, as we read through this, it's like there's going to be more and more. You're going to read through like, oh, another battle, another battle, another battle. There's 3 battles that are going to happen in the next 2 chapters. And then Ahab's going to have a change of heart. Because Ahab is not a good person. Remember that? He is probably the most wicked king Israel will ever have. A horrible king, and he is even put into shadow by his horribly wicked wife, Jezebel. Horribly wicked. So this is not a good situation, but Ahab has seen some absolutely amazing things. I don't know how many days it's been since he saw fire come down and consume the altar of Yahweh. It's been a couple months, maybe a year, but Ahab has seen that. I would think that would stick with me as a person if I saw fire from heaven come and consume something. I think that would be a formation on my soul as I pursue God in my life. I think that would be some huge moment of this. But Ahab, for some reason, he just doesn't seem to get it. He seems to just live in this self-worship. And I think that's the key right there, because Kings is all about, and all of Israel is continuing to follow idolatry. And idolatry is self-worship. You are giving the idol, you are giving the thing that you want, your power, because you're doing that because you think that it will feed you, it will sustain you. That's idolatry. And I think Ahab is so caught up in what he wants, and he has power, he has ability to get the things that he needs, to get the things that he wants, so he's comfortable with that. So even if you saw something so miraculous as fire coming down and consuming rocks and altars and water and cattle, it isn't enough, because he's still so in love with the things that he wants. He's still so wrapped up in the worship of himself. He's still so completely comfortable that even something that is absolutely unexplainable doesn't push him enough, doesn't make him uncomfortable enough to seek the things that are truly God. So we have his war here going on. Chapter 20, we're going to read pretty quick here. Ben-Hadad is the guy right there. He's the king of Syria. That's what you need to know. And he gathered his army together. 32 kings were there, horses and chariots, and he went up and closed in on Samaria. So here we have Ben-Hadad. He's the king of Syria. Israel's been at war with Syria for generations. This is nothing new. It's an old enemy, and he's coming up. They've got a treaty with Syria right now, and Ben-Hadad's getting greedy. He's got a big army, he's got a lot of people, he's got some resources, so he gathers up all 32 of his little vassal kings, and he gets an army together, and he goes in to attack Israel. And he sends a messenger to King Ahab and said, hey, I know we've got a treaty, I know you probably already paid me silver and gold because to keep the peace, but you know what? I want more. I want the best of your silver, I want the best of your gold, I want the best of your wives and the best of your women. And he sits back and he sends this message into him, and King Ahab goes, sure. What a horrible response. I think Ahab is probably thinking this is more of an appeasement. This is just a power play. He's trying to flex his muscles a bit to really make sure that we're paying that money for the treaty so we don't come in and wipe him out. And King Ahab's like, yep, just take what you want. Just leave me be. Which I think is not the king of Israel. That is not a king who trusts in the God who is the God of everything. This is Ahab who's just misunderstanding that God is for his people. That God is not a God among other gods. He is not a God who is powerful. He's the God who is. He is existence. He has created everything. He sustains everything. He holds everything in his hand. Our God is not a small God. He is absolutely not small. And part of that understanding is that even when we think we know how big he is, we have to be open that he is bigger than we realize how big he is. You see the humility in that? Oh yeah, God's big. But even in the biggest moment of your life, in the biggest thought, comprehension, somehow concept of the huge bigness, awesomeness of God, it is too small. We cannot comprehend fully the immensity of God. And we have to understand that we can't. But yet that makes it even more so because I can't even fathom it. I think that's phenomenal. So picking up in verse 9, he said to the messengers of Ben-Hadad, "Tell my lord the king, all that you first demanded of your servant I will do. But this thing I cannot do." So he's pushing back a little bit. You can't have all the wives. I'll give you some more money. That's fine. And Ben-Hadad sent back to him and said, "The gods do to me and more." This was just said a chapter ago by Jezebel. All of the gods that I serve, all the things that I serve, may they do whatever they want to me if you don't do what I want, because I'm going to demolish you. It's a threat. It's the biggest threat that Ben-Hadad can give. So when Ben-Hadad heard this message, sorry, I jumped ahead. So the dust of Samaria shall not suffice for all the handfuls of people to follow me. So he's saying, I'm going to absolutely so destroy you that all the people in my army won't even be able to grab a handful of dust, because I'm going to destroy everything physically possible. So he's like, I'm not just going to take your stuff, I'm going to wipe you and all of your buildings and every mention of you from history forever. He's doing it, he's flexing as much as he can. And the king of Israel answered, "Tell him, let not who straps on his army boast himself of who takes it off." So King Ahab is getting smart. I don't know if this is because King Ahab isn't thinking right, because he's doing some weird stuff, but King Ahab is pushing back. He goes, "That's it, you've drawn the line, King. You may think you've got all the armies, you may think you have this massive thing coming out here and flexing your muscles," and he's making really a snarky comment. He's saying, let the one who has his armor on come and fight me, because not the one who doesn't have the armor on. So he's taking a poke at King Ben-Hadad, because Ben-Hadad does not fight. He is the king who just yells at people. He's the king that doesn't do anything. In fact, as we're going to see, Ben-Hadad does one thing very well in chapter 20, and he gets drunk again and again and again. And that's what he does. And he mocks people and flexes his muscles. So King Ahab throws out this insult, saying, "Hey, you don't even know how to fight. You don't even put your armor on." He probably would say, "Your armor doesn't even fit." And so that obviously goes over really, really well with Ben-Hadad. So, and behold, coming up, jumping down, there's a lot going on in here. So obviously you can tell what's going to happen. Ben-Hadad packs up his stuff and goes home, right? No, he's been insulted to a crazy amount of degrees. So Ben-Hadad's going to go full-fledged in. He's got a huge army. In fact, one of the verses in here says that Israel, when they marched out to meet Ben-Hadad, looked like 2 small flocks of goats before a massive army. Just a huge, huge different thing. So we have a prophet who comes to Ahab. We don't know who this prophet is. It's an unnamed prophet. And it says, verse 13, "Have you seen this great multitude?" And it says, "Behold, I," talking about God, "will give it into your hand today, and you shall know that I am the Lord." So here he sends a prophet to King Ahab in the midst of all of this, a king who has chased down Elijah, who is married to evil incarnate Jezebel, and he says, if you continue to push back against Syria, I will give them into your hand, and you will know today that I am God, that there is no other. Again, God extending grace, God extending chances, God extending things for his people. He is not a small God, but he is a God who is for his glory and for his people. A God who is extending grace to Ahab. You may have seen some amazing stuff, but yet you continue to do evil. You continue to worship idols, but yet he's a God for his people. I'm going to deliver you from an army that you should never win against. Syria was incredibly massive army. This is not a fight. Israel was never this military dynamite might because they had millions of people. Israel won battles because God was their God. That's the history of Israel. And Ahab, again, not really understanding what's going on. He said, by whom? How are we going to win? I don't know if he's just ignorant. And thus says the Lord, by the servants of the governors of the district, who shall begin the battle? You will. God's just like, you're going to do it. I'm going to lead you to victory. Get all the generals together. Get all the people together. And Ahab's like, but who's going to start? Who's going to throw the first punch? And God's sitting there. I mean, maybe this is me. He's just like, you are. I'm with you. I'm the guy who's in charge. No one compares to me. You start the battle because I told you to do this. Elisha goes and burns his yoke and sacrifices his oxen. King Ahab, with everything, all of the amenities of being a king, looks at God and says, but who's going to start? How am I going to do this? What's going on? Big difference in how they understand God. But God is for his people. And so they went on at noon, this is verse 16, while Ben-Hadad was drinking himself drunk in the booths. And he and 32 kings who helped him, and the servants of the governors went out first, and Ben-Hadad sent out scouts. They reported to them, men are coming from Samaria. If they've come out for peace, take them alive. If they come out for war, take them alive. So Ben-Hadad's like, oh, that little puny thing, this is all the army of Israel. This is not a big army. Ben-Hadad thinks it's a peace treaty group of people. Oh, take them alive. That's whatever. We'll just deal with them later. Ben-Hadad is also not sober. And so they went out from the city, and the servants of the governors, and followed him, and each struck down his man. Then the Syrians fled, and Israel pursued them. But Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, escaped on a horse with a horseman, and they went out and struck them all down. And the prophet came near to Israel and said to him, come, strengthen yourself, consider well what you have done, for the king of Syria will come up against you again. This is one of 3 battles that's going to happen to Syria. And the servants of the king of Syria said, and I think this is really great, because they just got absolutely destroyed by this tiny little army. And they run and they fled and they flee away. And so what's their response? Their response is like, you would think it would be smart enough that they would leave and not come back. They just got routed by a little army. And the servants said, their gods are the gods of the hills. And so they were stronger than us, but let us fight them on the plains, and surely we will be stronger than them. That's their conclusion. Oh, we fought them on a hill? Oh, that's because they worship a God who's the God of the hills. Our gods are the gods of the plains where it's flat. So therefore, if we move the territory, then we're going to win. Oh man, we were so foolish. We didn't know that their God believed in, and they were the God of the hills. If we only fought them on a little less elevation, we would have won. Just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. They're trying to say, oh, but this is this. Their God is just that specific thing. So therefore, if we change the scenario and change the environment, then we'll win. Okay, let's try this again. So I don't know what it is, how they think this through. And so they mustered up all of the Syrians, and because the Lord is the God of the hills, and they camped against each other for 7 days. On the 7th day of the battle, this is verse 29, was joined all the people of Israel. All the people of Israel struck down 100,000 Syrian soldiers. But our God, their God is the God of the hills only. So let's fight them on the plains. 100,000 people. Our God is not a small God. Our God does what is important. Our God does what is necessary. Our God is the God who puts kings in place, who puts nations in place, who puts nations in order. He is that God, and he wants to have a relationship with us. It seems far-fetched. It seems far apart, doesn't it? Here is God who can orchestrate the world, who can put Ben-Hadad on the kingdom and yet also have little armies destroy him and put him back. He's the God who anoints certain kings for certain purposes. It says in Isaiah that he's anointing kings to bring up the Chaldeans because I'm about to do something that you wouldn't believe if I told you. That's our God, the God who orchestrates history. That's what we see in some of these stories. Yes, this is historical. Yes, this is a battle. Yes, this is something that's a historical account. But in the midst of this, we see God moving, acting, investing in his people for his glory. And Ben-Hadad also fled and entered into the city. This is verse 30. And behold, we heard that the king of the house of Israel are merciful kings. So we have this scene where 100,000 people have been killed in Syria, been killed by him. And Ben-Hadad is fleeing. He's been commanded to be killed by God. He's not to be around. And so Ben-Hadad flees to a city. And we heard that the kings in Israel, they're merciful. So maybe if we put on sackcloth and ashes and they're going to dress up in a disguise and we throw ourselves at the mercy of King Ahab and we try to offer a bunch of stuff, then maybe he will let us go. Maybe he will forgive us. Maybe he will just not, we violated the treaty, we tried to kill him, all those, maybe he'll just forget about that. And so they have a scene where he puts on and dresses up and he goes to the King Ahab and says, have you heard about Ben-Hadad? He's my brother. Have you heard if he's alive? And it's Ben-Hadad himself. He's deceiving them, which is obviously not good to begin with. And King Ahab's like, yeah, I think he is alive, and I'm looking for him because I want to talk to him. And they make this barter. They make this treaty where if you let them leave, if you let them live and go back, they will have some other the cities that Syria has captured, and you don't have to pay the gold anymore. You don't have to pay the silver. You don't have to pay the money. You can just, things will just be cool between us. Just let me live and we'll go away and we'll pretend this never happened. And that's what Ahab does. It's not what God commands. It's not what God desires. It's not what God wanted. And so because of it, in a chapter later, we're going to have another battle with Syria. Syria is not satisfied. Because Ahab does not listen to what God has asked him to do, there's going to be more problems. There's going to be more trouble because God is trying to do something. We get this 35 through the end of chapter 20. There is a prophet who comes. We, again, don't know who this prophet is. Elijah and Elisha don't take place in this chapter. A prophet comes to Ahab and he says, you shouldn't have let him go. This is not what's going to happen. This is not what you're supposed to do. You have disobeyed God, He who led you to victory over hundreds of thousands of Syrians, who has put you in place, who has protected you, who has given you your kingship, who has given you your wealth, in spite of you continuing to follow idols, in spite of you continuing to turn your back on Him, in spite of you seeing the miraculous things of fire from heaven and immense victories, you continue to disobey the God who has given you grace upon grace upon grace. And so this prophet comes and confronts Ahab. He just confronts him. This is it. I've confronted you so many times, Ahab. We've talked about this. I've given you so many chances. And now this is it. In fact, he brings condemnation. Verse 42, thus says the Lord, because you have let go of your hand the man who I devoted to destruction, therefore your life shall be for his life and your people for his people. That's it. We have tried. Remember the book of Kings is 400 years we're covering? And so really we're a couple hundred years into it. And there has been nothing but horrible idolatry worship and turning our back on God for hundreds of years. It is not good. Maybe there was that time with David and Solomon where it's kind of good, and then it's just been downhill, rapidly downhill in Israel. And God continues to, hey, come back to me. Hey, I'm giving you the grace. Do you remember me? I'm the God who did everything. Remember me? I'm the God who loves you. Remember me? I'm the God who led you out of Egypt. I'm the God who gave you this land. I'm the God who gave you worship. I'm the God who gave you the law. I'm the God who wants to know you. I am for you. You're my people. I'm for my glory. Do you remember me? They continue to forget that, to forsake Him, to turn their back on Him again and again in the midst of things that are incredible. They continue to forget and fail to remember God. Just a chapter ago, Elijah is upset. What's going on? I've been jealous for the Lord of armies. I wanted the God who's going to come in and wipe them out and start over. That's what Elijah wants. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of being the only one. I'm tired of being the one who wants to stick up for you. Why don't you just start over? Why don't you just do this all over again, God? Because they're being wicked. They call them stiff-necked over again. They're stubborn. They just care about themselves. That's what I want, God. And God doesn't even dignify him with a response. He just continues to say, but what are you doing here? Because here's what I'm about. Now go and do likewise. I couldn't help but think about this in the New Testament. Grace upon grace. Mercy upon mercy. Chance upon chance. But yet He's a God who is just and fair. I'm in John chapter 10. And I love this picture in John. It's one of my favorite pictures of Jesus. It's the same God. Jesus and God are two different people. He's part of the Trinity, which is the one God. This is the same God who is in this book of Kings, leading people to worship, leading people in military battles, calling people back to Himself. I'm not going to wipe everyone out and start over again, but we have this God in John chapter 10, and He says, I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay myself down for the sheep. Because here's the truth of this, is that there's the condemnation. That's it, Ahab. You can't do it. You can't obey me. I'm going to your life for their life, and your people for his people. That's just it. He should, in all fairness, it would be absolutely just and fair of God to wipe everyone out. But he doesn't. But he doesn't. Because I lay my life down for my sheep. And I have other sheep that are not of this fold, and I must bring them also. And they will listen to my voice, so there will be one flock and one shepherd. I lay my life down for my sheep. Who is condemned? Israel, we are all in sin. We are all disobedient. We are all, in some sense, turning our face, running away from the things that God has told us to do. Your life for my life, that's it. But yet we have a God who also says, but I will lay my life down for my sheep, for you. I will give my life because you are foolish. And because, most of all, because I love you. For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay my life, but that I may take it back up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down on my accord. I'm not doing it because I have to. I'm doing it because I want to. Because my people are lost. My people are disobedient. My people don't understand. Ahab has just been condemned in sin. And it's really no different than our sin. But yet, but Christ came, sought, saved us, and laid his life down for us. And paid that penalty. Because here's the neat thing. Before we finish up the book of 1 Kings, Ahab is going to repent. It's going to be incredible. We're not going to get there yet because I'm out of time. I really want you guys to bring your worship team up. Leave it up.